Thank you, Miss Papa. The brain influences the spinal cord. Nervous system. The nervous system has two main parts, the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. The nervous system controls your actions. It coordinates different parts of your body so that they can work together and are able to bring about the correct responses. Your nervous system coordinates your muscles so that you can walk, run, ride, and breathe. When you smile, the nervous system coordinates the muscles in your face. Your nervous system also coordinates things that you don't even think about, like swallowing, blinking, and breathing. The brain is protected inside the skull, while the spinal cord is protected inside your backbone. The central nervous system is made up of brain and spinal cord, while the peripheral nervous system is made up of nerves that branch off from the spinal cord and extend to all parts of the body. This system aids in the coordination of voluntary and involuntary actions and reflex actions in our body. The nervous system consists of nerve cells, or what we call neurons. They transmit messages in the form of electric impulses through neurons and convey our sense organ. Getting a reaction. All our reactions happen in the same way. There are always stimuli, receptors, effectors. Stimuli are changes that can be detected. Receptors detect the changes. Effectors bring about the responses. What happens if you sit down on a drawing pin? The stimulus is the drawing pin. The receptors are the pin receptors. Your response is to get up quickly. The chain event of it is stimulus, receptor, coordinator, effector to response. The coordinator is the part of the body that decides what to do. The messages that nerves carry are called nerve impulses. So this is the sample of sensory neuron and the motor neuron. They carry electrical signals. They pass very quickly along the axon of the neuron. An impulse travels along the axon like a train along a track. Each one is separate from the next. They travel along one after the other. Some axons have a fatty sheet around them. This insulates the axon and makes the impulse travel faster. Nervous coordination. Nervous coordination involves the participation of our sense organs, nerves, spinal cord, and brain. The changes which occurs around us can be easily detectable by our sense organs. This is because the nervous system has neurons at their tip, which consist of dendrites, cell body, nucleus, and axon. The information detected by dendrites are converted into impulses and are passed on to the cell body. Axon collects these impulses. At the nerve ending, electrical impulses are converted into chemicals and released. The chemicals will be passed to the next neuron through a gap called synapse. This is how one neuron transfers the messages to another neuron. Synapses. The end of one neuron is not connected to the next. There is always a small gap between them. The gap is called a synapse. Synapses have two other functions, a resistor and a junction box. When an impulse reaches the end of an axon, a chemical is produced. The chemical diffuses across the gap. It starts off an impulse in the next neuron. Only one end of a neuron can make this chemical. So synapses make sure an impulse can travel in one direction. Resistor. It may take a number of impulses before enough chemical is made to start the impulse in the next neuron. Junction box. One neuron may pass on its impulse to a number of other neurons. Our synapses are easily affected by drugs. Some drugs can block them. Others can make them work too quickly. Alcohol is thought to affect synapses in the brain. This can show that it can slow down people's reaction. The neural system controls three types of actions, and these actions consist of reflex action or reflex, voluntary action, and involuntary action. Reflex action. Reflex action or reflex is an involuntary action in response to a stimulus. This is a spontaneous action without thinking. Reflex arc. The peripheral nervous system, or PNS, is a system of nerves which connect the central nervous system, or CNS, includes the brain and spinal cord, with other parts of the body. Reflex action is the result of the coordination of the spinal cord and peripheral nervous system. This action does not involve the brain. The pathway in which impulses travel during the reflex action is called reflex arc. Stimulus. The stimulus is the flame. Receptor. The receptor is the heat sensor in the skin. Sensory neuron passes along on an impulse to the CNS. Motor neuron. This passes the impulse onto the effector. Relay neuron. In the spinal cord, the impulse is passed onto the relay neuron. It's part of the coordination. Effector. It is the motor neuron that carries the impulse to a muscle in the arm. Response is the muscle that contracts to remove the hand from the hot object. Voluntary action. All actions are performed voluntarily after thinking. It involves actions like walking, eating, jumping, and running. It only involves muscles. These actions are produced consciously. Both spinal cord and brain are involved, and these coordinate with PNS to generate necessary movements. Involuntary action. Actions which take place without consciousness or willingness of an individual. For example, digestion, heart beating, sneezing are examples of involuntary actions. Both involuntary and voluntary actions. Both involuntary and voluntary actions are called by the same parts of the brain. Hindbrain and midbrain control involuntary actions like salivation, vomiting, and etc. All the body's voluntary actions are controlled by the motor cortex in the frontal lobe of our cerebrum. Descending spinal tracts. The lateral corticospinal tract and the rubrospinal tract are the two lateral motor systems that regulate extremity motions. For quick dexterous movement at specific digit or the joints, the lateral corticospinal tract is very important. The ventromedial pathway regulates trunk movements as well as bilateral actions, including standing, bending, walking, and sitting. The tectospinal tract is involved in orienting the eyes and the head towards sounds as part of auditory and visual reflex. It originates from the superior colliculus, which is involved in both the auditory and visual pathways. Vestibulospinal tract is to maintain equilibratory reflexes from the input of the vestibular apparatus. They will reach the axial muscle, intercostal, and back muscle, as well as the extensors of the limbs. Pontine reticulospinal tract function is to excite motor neurons to proximal extensor muscle to support posture. Medullary reticulospinal tract inhibits the extensor and stimulates the flexor muscle of the trunk and proximal limbs. The rubrospinal tract is the control of muscle tone in the flexor muscle groups. The premotor cortex appears to be involved in the selection of appropriate motor plans for voluntary movements, whereas the primary motor cortex is involved in the execution of these voluntary movements. Premotor cortex activity distinguishes the same movement based on the behavioral context of the movement. When the subject viewed an arm moving to pick up a cup to drink, the activity in the premotor cortex was greater than when the subject viewed an arm moving to pick up a cup to clear the table after a meal. Note that the strength of activity in the cortex, denoted by the brightness of the activated cortical region, is greater in the top than in the bottom animations. The pyramidal tract controls muscle actions voluntarily. The corticonuclear tract and the corticospinal tract are two separate routes. The corticospinal tract transports motor impulses from the brain's primary motor cortex to the trunk and limb muscle through the spinal cord. Pyramidal tracts. Conscious control of muscle from the cerebral cortex to the muscle of the body and base. Extrapyramidal tract originate in the brainstem, carrying motor fibers to the spinal cord. Descending tracts are the pathway by which motor signals are sent from the brain to the spinal cord. They are also called motor tracts due to their involvement in movement coordination. These tracts can be classified by their structural arrangement into lateral and medial tract. The lateral corticospinal tract contains over 90% of the fibers present in the corticospinal tract and runs the length of the spinal cord. The primary responsibility of the lateral corticospinal tract is to control the voluntary movement of the contralateral limbs. Injuries to the lateral corticospinal tract results in ipsilateral paralysis or inability to move, paresis or decreased motor strength, and hypertonia that increased tone for muscle innervated caudal to the level of injury. The lateral corticospinal tract can suffer damage in a variety of ways. The most common type of injury are central cord syndrome, Brown-Sequard syndrome, and anterior spinal cord syndrome. The maintaining of an upright vertical posture above the two supporting limbs is known as tonic or static posture. Locomotion is the movement of the body in a specific direction via a coordinated set of muscular movements while maintaining the body's overall relationship to the ground. The tectospinal tract is found in the ventral column of the spinal cord.